Okay, I'm going to demonstrate some of the techniques that I've used in this interesting sweater. It's a pullover that was knitted in the round from the bottom up, at least the base garment, but then these strips were added after that, and each of these strips is knitted from stitches that were picked up around the body. So the reason that the stitches are worked with the garment upside down is that when you first knit this row of picked up stitches, it forms a row of bumps on this side of the fabric, and because we want to have those bumps be on the underside of these strips, that's why it was done upside down. So I've already worked the first half of this last strip here, which started at the left side, ran around the back and under this arm, and then across the front, across this left shoulder, and ended here. And I'm now picking up the stitches to work the rest of this band, which continues across the back neck, across the right shoulder, and then down the right front neck. And now what I'm going to need to do is pick up stitches across the other part of this strip, and that will form the overlap for this last strip. So what I'm going to do, I've used these removable markers to mark the approximate line that this strip will follow, just so that I know I'm not getting too far off. And then since this band here, this wrapping, it looks like if I go right along this column of stitches, I'll be pretty much where I want to be. So in the interest of not making things any more difficult than they have to be, I'm going to do that. So I'm going to use this needle tip, pick up a stitch here, and then I'm going to go down this row of stitches, and because the stitch width and the stitch height are slightly different, what I'm going to do, let's see, so a stitch is usually wider than it is high, and this is going to be the width here. So we need fewer stitches than we need rows. So I'm going to pick up about 2 for every 3 of these stitches here, and I'm just going to use one leg of a column of stitches. So here we go. I'm going to pick up this one here, and then the next one, and I'm going to skip one, pick up the next 2, I'm going to skip the next one, pick up the next 2. So I'm using this hand to kind of just push the needle forward gently as I go. This needle happens to have a rather sharp point, which makes this a little bit easier. Other things you can do to make this part easier, because you're doing a lot of these picking up of stitches, is to use a smaller needle. Just make sure that when you start knitting, you use the correct size needle. And you can also use a longer circular needle, because then you won't have to bunch up the stitches so much. So I've just picked up 2, you can see that. So I'm going to skip the next one, pick up 2 more, skip the next one, pick up 2 more, and then I'm going to pick one up just right at this edge here. So I'm going to do that, and I'm going to hold on to this part of the needle carefully, and when I want to move the stitches back along it. But if I don't hold on to this needle, then the stitches are just as likely to pop off this end as to move back. So, and that can be annoying. So hold on to that, and then slide these stitches back, slide the cable forward a little bit, and then we will go ahead and, so you see right about here is where this band overlaps. So I'm just going to start picking up stitches right where it looks like it would naturally continue the line. So I'm going to pick up this one. So now I'm going to pick up one leg of every stitch. And since these bands actually are not completely parallel, the reason for that is that the V-neck would have been too shallow if I'd made them parallel to the hem here. However, if I had made this hem part at the same angle as the V-neck, then it would have been too much of an angle at the bottom of the garment, in my opinion. So each of these strips is angled slightly in this direction from the one before it. This is explained in the directions of the pattern. So by the time you reach this last 7th strip, you're going to need to switch rows of stitches as you pick them up the stitches, every 3 stitches approximately. So I'm just going to demonstrate that. So I'm going to take out this stitch marker just so it's not in our way. So I'm going to go 1, 2, 3. So those are straight in a line. But then I'm going to move on to the next row. So I'm going to go 1. See how that's in the next row. 2, 3. Push them along a little bit. And I'm going to move on to the next row. 1, 2, 3. Let's move these things along a bit. Okay. And then I'm going to move on to the next row again. So 1, 2, 3. Let's get that out of the way. So you can see, you actually can pick the stitches up with a stitch marker still in place, but and then we'll just keep going here. 1, 2, 3. Now I've got this work flat because I find it's easiest to see that, make sure that I'm picking up the stitches that I want to pick up, and not switching rows in the wrong place. So the garment is flat. I have very good lighting. I would suggest wearing cheaters if it makes it easier to see, anything that makes it easier to see what you're doing. And every once in a while, it's unlikely that I'll pick up, that the needle will go deep enough to pick up a stitch from the yarn from the back of the garment. But every once in a while I check to make sure that it's not attached. So we'll keep going. So here we're in this row. So we want to move 1, 2, 3. Let's pull this along here a bit. Okay. 1, 2, 3. Okay, 1. There's another marker. 2. And 3. 1, 2, 3. Okay, etc. All right, I'm going to finish that later. I just want to check. So that looks like that will be lying pretty flat when the stitches are worked, hopefully. And so now I'm going to turn this around and I'm going to switch to showing you how I fasten down the ends of these strips. So I've already done that for most of these, but I still have a couple more to do. So what I do is I take this yarn end, the ends that you've left a little on the long side from when you started the strip and after you bound off the end. And I'm going to tack this down to the row of stitches that's just under the beginning of this next strip. So I'm going to go ahead and pick up this stitch here, kind of right where this the end of this strip would fall, just so that it helps it to lie flat. So you'll notice that this stitch here is a little bit loose, tends to do that when you bind off, and rather than mess around with it, since you're not going to see it anyway, I'm going to just put the needle through the entire stitch on the edge and pull it through. So now remember that this strip was worked from here to here, so you're really looking at it upside down. So the edge stitch, seeing it upside down, is this stitch right here. And I'm only going to use this leg, the outer leg of the stitch, as I'm tacking the strip down, because we don't need a lot of strength here. It's not going to bear weight or anything, and I just feel that that gives it the neatest, flattest finish. So I'm going to go ahead and pick up another stitch right under the edge here. And then I'm going to pass it through just this leg of the stitch. And I'm going to do this for every other stitch on this strip. I don't think it's necessary to do it for every stitch. I'm just going to continue like that. Every other stitch. You can go like this. Use your finger underneath to help you see it a little bit better. And once again, you don't have to be super picky about this, about the intervals, as long as they're more or less the same distance apart. Pick that up. Okay, last one. All right. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to pass the needle to the wrong side of this strip. Okay. And I'm going to weave in the end using the purl bumps on the back of this strip. So I'm going to pass the needle diagonally through a few of these bumps, like so. I'm going to pull this first pass kind of snug, because otherwise there tends to be a bit of a loose loop on this end. And then what I'm going to do is pass it back in the other direction, again through these purl bumps. Now you can, what I call skim, you can actually pick up just part of the yarn, or you can do the entire strand of yarn. It doesn't really matter. As I'll show you, it really doesn't show on the right side at all. And I'm going to do this a couple more times, changing direction. These bumps. Okay. And this will keep the yarn from working itself loose. One more time. All right, I'm going to snip it, leaving a bit of a tail. Careful not to cut anything but the tail. Now, as you can see, it's not very visible even on the wrong side, and you certainly don't see it on the right side. Okay. Now, the only place where this will really show, and I'll show you, is this top band here on the sleeves. So what I would recommend is that you do some of these other strips first, get a little bit of practice. You can experiment a little bit if you want, as far as putting your needle through the entire stitch on the edge, or just through that one loop of each stitch as I showed you. Whatever gets you the neatest finish. So as you can see, that's pretty pretty clean looking. And all of the other areas where you stitch down that band will be covered by another part of the band. And here it is on the other side. Okay, happy knitting.